Cayman,
The voice,
the heart, the soul of the Cayman Islands.
Talk Today is brought to you by Subway, open 24 hours in Countryside, Anderson Square in Georgetown, and Centennial Towers in West Bay. And by the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your sister islands. MedLab in Smith Road Plaza, your complete medical laboratory solution. Call 949-7331.
Talk Today is proudly brought to you by Pirates Fest 2022. Stay in the know. Get the full event lineup at piratesfestcayman.com.
And Savannah Pharmacy in Countryside Shopping Village. Convenient opening hours, including Sundays and holidays.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email talktoday@candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255.
Courtesy of Flow.
Cayman's #1 network that connects you to your world like never before.
Let your voice be heard. Once again, here's your host, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us on another terrific Tuesday's edition of Talk Today as we invite you to be a part of our discussion. We're going to have a conversation relative to the newly sort of released bits of legislation relative to some bills being proposed and invitation for public consultation, the Identification Register Bill 2022 and the Cayman Islands Identification Card Bill 2022. In a few minutes, we'll have the excellent company of the Director of E-Government, Mr. Ian Tibbetts, the Acting Deputy Chief Officer, Mr. Charles Brown, and the Minister of Investment, Innovation and Social Development, and then one of the Senior Policy Advisors for Investment Innovation, Trevor Gibbs, expected to be our guest. We want you to stay tuned, listen in, be informed, be a part of a discussion, and hopefully understand the impetus for it, the importance of it, the call to reduce red tape as a result of its successful passage, and perhaps get some of your questions answered. We won't necessarily take any calls during that particular segment, but certainly we can be informed and engaged. 8949-8037, 1-800-534-TALK is our normal numbers that we would use, but when we start a discussion on the two proposed bills that are out for public consultation, we just want you to listen and be informed, but use our WhatsApp to share your thoughts. That's 925-3261. But in the meantime, until our guests get settled, we will certainly invite your comments as we go to our phones. Hey, welcome, good afternoon, thank you for calling.
You sure you thanking me for calling?
Of course, sir. Thank you, Brother George. How are you today, sir?
Well, I got find out from you how I am.
Well, listen, I would tell you this, right? And this is based on how I try to look at it. I believe you would be, most gracious, most grateful, and feel a sense of blessings from on high.
You better believe that.
Mm-hmm.
I got a whole book in my hand right now. I study that every day because we need that more and more now in Cayman than ever before. And I'm going to tell you something.
Mm-hmm.
If the Caymanians that know how to pray, now is the time. If you never need to pray before, now is the time. With so many things happening.
Mm.
But I'll leave that to that. Then God is God and only Him can be God, because I couldn't be God to see what's going on and just leave it like that.
Yeah. Period of season.
Mr. Sterling, about these new ID cards, will they be issued to every Caymanian, or even those that came here and obtained papers and as Caymanians, or just the true-born Caymanians? How is that going to go?
All right, well, we're going to ask that question specifically, but let me ask of you then. You asked if they can be issued to everybody that comes there, only to true-born Caymanians. What is your, not just your perception of how it should be, but share with us.
Mr. Sterling, I think that we can't do nothing. The government say that you come here and you become a Caymanian. Well, if they got to make sure that everybody have it. I don't know if it's going to be mandated or just voluntarily done. But what about your voters registration card? Wouldn't it be cheaper to upgrade the voters registration card and just use that as your national ID than to do a new something all over? Or even your driver's license, I don't know.
Right. So let me then ask you then, based on that, what is your perception of the card? Are you seeing it as a way to identify who is a citizen of the country? What do you see is the use for the card from your perspective? Is it to identify you as a citizen of the country, as a resident, or a person who's in the space, as a person who, with this card, you can do certain things? What do you see the card being used for?
I think to know everything about you, to know your life.
Okay.
Okay. And another quick question I want to find, and you can find me because I'll be listening.
Yes, sir.
Will this card information be able to for anybody in the U.S. or in Europe or in Russia, Asia, to know everything about you? Will that be the case, or it would just be used for Cayman purposes?
So from there, I have perhaps two questions I may be hearing you asking. One, how secure and confidential is the card? And then the second one is, well, is the card something that you could use internationally, like you would potentially use your passport? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Yes, sir. That's what I want to find out.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Those are good questions, and certainly ones that we want to ask and we expect to be.
Because I'm thinking that the voters registration card upgraded would be much cheaper than doing this whole new identification thing over. I don't know. And will your fingerprint be put on that?
Good question, right? Would you want it to be on it if you were a person?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
What about a sample of your DNA somewhere about?
Pardon?
How do you feel about that? That we all give a sample of our DNA, have it in a national DNA database somewhere about, and we all have our DNA collected and stored somewhere securely, of course, no?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is just for Cayman purposes alone, not for the whole world.
Well,
I don't know how the other parts of the world operate. I don't know, but I'm just talking about here in Cayman.
Okay. Well, that's one of the questions we want to ask too. How other parts of the world, have done something similar. What have they done? How does it compare to what we're doing? I'm expecting, because of Mr. Ian Tibbetts, his formal background in the private sector with the technology. Now he's the director of e-government. Very, very astute, very knowledgeable. And then the two other fellows joined him. The acting deputy chief officer and the minister, Mr. Charles Brown. Remarkable intellect as well. And then Trevor Gibbs, the senior policy advisor for investment and innovation. Hopefully between the three of them and your prompting, we can get a better edification of what this thing is all about.
Yeah, but Mr. Sturden, you got to remember that the Cayman is very, very, very small compared to the outside world. And certain things that the outside world is prone to and can do, I don't think it would be good for Cayman. I'm just saying, that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
In my opinion, doesn't matter, but it matters to me.
Well, I think you should always...
I will leave you at that, sir, and if you can give me a call after the show, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, sir.
Have a wonderful afternoon, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir, and you can ask them questions because I'll be listening to those folks, please.
Right, and if I could, in saying to you, also invite others who are listening to share, with family, friends, and everyone alike. There is this public consultation period relative to these two proposed bills, and take the time, talk it over, with each other, maybe review it independently, and provide some feedback. There are many positives. There are probably some concerns, but if we have an understanding, perhaps they can be addressed and assurances, had. So I hope that happens, huh?
Yeah, but Mr. Stern, and I'm thinking as you talk, and I'm laughing because a lot of people mightn't want the fingerprints on that because, all Israel not Israel. So many of them might, reject against that. But I think the fingerprint is very, very utmost important. And I hope that is involved in it. Because even the good books say, if you're good, you're going to remain good. If you're bad, you're going to remain bad. So,
yep. Well, we'll ask about the fingerprints if they're included. All right.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you very much. And, I sometimes, when I would write, whether it's a short story or a bit of prose for poetry or otherwise, despite my almost contempt for little fables of what we call nursery rhymes, I never did quite like them. A friend of mine who is quite creative, he says, that what develops your creative, sort of space. But I never thought, take the one, for instance, that we used to hear, rockabye baby in the treetop. I thought, what, when the wind blows and the cradle will rock and down comes, no, that didn't make sense to me. I don't want to be that baby in that treetop. So lots of little things that didn't logically make sense. I share that to ask you as we think about where we are, let's ensure that we have that sense of engagement. Let's be informed. Let's get involved, and let's make sure that whatever legislation that is passed or amended, whatever policies are proposed or adopted, we especially as the voter, that we actively participate. Now, if you live and work in a space, if you are living there because you're semi-retired, you take your residence there for an extended period, or if you have a vested interest because of investments, the love for people, the connection of sorts, let's actively and positively contribute. All right. I would say that, as I was saying to you, despite my almost disdain for nursery rhymes, I try to look as I'm in the studio and imagine that even though it's a windowless wall, when I look out, I would say, wow, what a beautiful vista. Imagine being up top a mountain somewhere and down below is the crested waves against the beach, and as it sort of rolls beyond the rocky outcroppings and and that green foliage. Somehow you come to shore, you kind of walking. So imagine the Barker's Beach meeting the Camelback Bluff. Kind of a beautiful vista that you can sometimes take his mind in your space elsewhere. All right, we're going to pause and hopefully be able to have our guests settle and have this conversation. So please stay tuned for Talk Today.
Come celebrate 53 years with big savings. Brand Source Home Gallery invites you to their 53rd anniversary sale. 1 week only, November 7th to 12th. Save up to 40% off store-wide. Sale discounts on appliances, lighting and fans, faucets, sinks, kitchen cabinets, custom closets, mattresses, housewares, and more. Come get inspired by inspiring luxury as Brand Source Home Gallery celebrates 53 years with a sale till November 12th. 209 Dorsey Drive in Industrial Park. Call 623-5000.
Busy, busy, busy. Feel like there's not just enough hours in the day. Savannah Pharmacy, service to make your life easier. Now you can WhatsApp your prescription order to 929-5045. And pickup is just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours including Sundays and holidays. WhatsApp your prescription order to 929-5045. Savannah Pharmacy, wholesome values with modern conveniences.
And the whole island is one big party, party, party.
Grand Cayman Pirates Fest is here. Taking over Seafarers Way. Saturday, November 12th, Georgetown events start at 1 p.m. with the cardboard boat race and water mermaids showcase. The pirates storm the streets at 3 p.m. followed by the float parade, national song and heritage costume competition, and fireworks show at 9 p.m. A full Saturday of thrills for the entire family, including 8 hours of food festival. Saturday, November 12th, the party takes over Seafarers Way. Afternoon till night. Come for lunch, party a bunch, and pirate the night away.
For medical lab services in Cayman, go straight to MedLab. Blood test, x-ray, and mammogram, all of that is MedLab. Affordable fees and friendly service, a full professional team. MedLab is always comfortable, MedLab is always clean. For medical lab services in Cayman, MedLab.
Wouldn't it have been grand if you had purchased land 30 years ago? It may not be 2020, but a perfect vision has never been more clear. Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, poised for growth with an eye on the future. Your land, your history, your future. Discover all that our sister islands have to offer.
I've got some beautiful clothes. I know just where they go. Puritan Cleaners.
Puritan Cleaners, now using the most popular and eco-friendly cleaning solvents. 2 convenient locations to serve you: Savannah Countryside and Eastern Avenue, Georgetown. Drive-through, rain or shine, free pickup and delivery services available. Call Puritan Cleaners 949-7104. Also ask about our in-house discounts. Puritan Cleaners, you feel good when you look good.
Puritan Cleaners, 949-7104. That's 949-7104.
89.9 Radio Cayman helps you to weather the storm during this hurricane season.
One of the most crucial elements of hurricane preparedness is storm awareness. During the season, it is of utmost importance to pay attention to the latest local weather forecast, as hurricanes do not suddenly form or strike. There are various methods of advanced notification. Utilizing such may be the difference between a favorable outcome and disaster. Both television and radio serve as excellent mediums with up-to-the-minute storm path information in the wake of a hurricane. Another method of tracking a hurricane may be only arm's length away. Your smartphone or tablet can be your most valuable tool before, during, and after a storm, providing countless numbers of apps with crucial hurricane information. Many apps allow you to track storms with moving radar and satellite imagery, plus offer alerts, current conditions, forecasts, advisories, and even video.
This hurricane preparedness tip was brought to you by your community radio station, Radio Cayman, 89.9 FM.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Good afternoon, welcome back, and thanks for joining us. And as mentioned at the outset, we are the excellent company of the opportunity to talk about some 2 proposed bills, and in the studio from the Ministry of Investment, Innovation and Social Development, the Acting Deputy Chief Officer, Mr. Charles Brown. And I'm honored to welcome you and the fine gentlemen to our studio, and with your absolute, sort of approval, Mr. Brown, would you be so honored to welcome Mr. Tibbs and Mr. Gibbs for us?
Thank you very much for having us on, Sterling. I have with me in the studio the Director of E-Government, the E-Government Unit, Mr. Ian Tibbets, and also a member of the Senior Policy Team with the Ministry, Mr. Trevor Gibbs. He's a Senior Policy Advisor with the Ministry of Investment, Innovation and Social Development.
And gentlemen, welcome. It's good to have Mr. Tibbets back again. Mr. Gibbs, likewise, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
As we get into our discussion, I think as we mentioned to our listeners, we're going to have this discussion. We're talking about 2 proposed bills that are going to come to the House in early December, according to the press release: the Identification Register Bill 2022 and the Cayman Identification Card Bill. Perhaps, Mr. Brown.
Sure. So these are 2 bills that are connected in that they work together. The register is basically a small database of minimal information that is already stored around multiple departments, like your name, your sex, date of birth, very, very minor information, and they're broken down into identity facts and related facts. The core is just, as I mentioned, the basic stuff, and then the related facts would be information that you, the person, really would hold, like your telephone number or your place of address, things that move, change, that you keep up to date. And this is really giving individuals their identity back with the government. It's handing them a portal that allows them to maintain this information in a much more centralized and unique way, and allows them to leverage the efficiencies now of a system to benefit from that, so that we can share that basic information as needed when you fill out a form, let's say.
I'm appreciative that the bill was just the press release came out on Friday.
Correct.
The House is expected to meet in about a month or so. So many people will be willing to go online. I think the gazette.gov.ky to look at the bills and be a part of the consultation.
Mm-hmm.
But Mr. Brown, if I may ask, we know that, as you referenced, many different government entities, including the statutory authorities, even the Health Services Authority, we have information on people in the country. Is it expectation now that with this bill that information then will be all centralized and whatever they have will be secondary to what's in the register?
So that's a great question, and that's one of the main reasons we're here, to just educate and to help the public understand how this will work. So in terms of centralization, there's no concept of that. Every government entity has data controllers. They maintain the data for that entity. None of that's going to change. And this really is a minimum set of data as it relates to just the core information that is already captured in many of those entities, but just allows the public to use it in a different way. So I'll give you an example. You every time you go to DVDL, they ask you, well, what's your name? Where do you live? What's your telephone number? You go to DCI to apply for something, same thing. You go to HSA, they ask you the same thing. So you're filling out a lot of this common information multiple times. That's the basic set that is in this particular database. And partnered with the bills, the concept is interoperability. It's really just a concept where departments now have the ability to share this core information to help make your life more efficient.
Right. We may come back to ask about it again, because sort of it's a shared information across departments. And as we referenced to our listeners earlier, during this segment, we would kindly ask that you respect the request. We won't take any calls. Information dissemination, get people to understand, hopefully serve as the impetus to go now and look at proposed legislation and be a part of the consultation period. The control, Mr. Brown, that you shared, that comes back to the individual. They can now go in, and they were living in one district and have moved to another. Their telephone numbers have changed. It's information. They can then go and just change it.
So we have a concept of assurance built into the legislation, and again, the information you're alluding to is the information that does change quite frequently. And if you look at any database across government, that's the information that is the least reliable because it's constantly changing. So this puts the controls back in the individual's hands in telling us what's the most recent information as it relates to their address. And we haven't really talked about the card, but the card is optional. And if you were to leverage the use of the card, then you are able to, at a government service that's ready to interact in this way, as simple as plugging it in, share that information with that entity, if needed.
I certainly want to ask about the card, and not to belabor it, but just before I ask Mr. Tibbetts to weigh in, one more point in terms of I would say the onus on the individual. I think you have alluded to it as being, the authority, the autonomy on the individual. So that person who now accesses and say, listen, I've just changed my address, I changed my phone number. Any requirement on the person to make that change under the proposed legislation? Because some of us change our telephones just as often as we change our neckties.
Correct. So there is an element that talks about updating this information, and if you think about items such as names, for instance, there can be a lot of confusion on names, and it is important that we know who we're dealing with. There have been examples in the past where, across 4 different types of identification documents, 2 passports, a driver's license, and maybe an election card, a person has different names on every one, just because they got married, or then they got divorced, and then they got, right? So it is very important to update this type of information, and the bill allows that where the the source of truth, the source of record is involved, such as General Registry, then the onus is not on the person anymore. That once General Registry is connected, they can update that information automatically.
Okay.
And it makes it much more efficient for all of us. So if there's a deed poll that has happened, for instance, that's an automatic update to the register, and that's why it's beneficial.
And then just one quick recap. Obviously, the name of the person, the gender, what other information would be on this register?
So I'll just read them out. So there's the person's name, date of birth, nationality, the sex, immigration status, and then obviously the identification code, the unique code now that is really allowing people to be identified uniquely. And we'll talk about the gap and why in a bit. Place of birth, also the identification code of the parents. So this is very important when you're doing things like tracking immigration status down the line, and it'll be very beneficial. They're also very helpful in terms of emergency contact information if needed. So these are the optional stuff on this side. Delegated authority, height, eye color, the physical signature if a person really wanted it, the photograph, and then their contact information if they so choose to enter that information.
All right. Very. I can see, an attempt to make it as exhaustive as possible, and with that unique number, very much like the vehicle identification number on a car, in a sense. All right. This was reminding me that we have a break. When we come back, perhaps Mr. Tibbetts, if you wish, maybe just say who is going to be included in the register. I mean, Mr. Brown alluded to certain things, but we can talk about it. All right. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
A caring and community spirit, cherished family and cultural values. These are some of the things that still embodies the Caymanian way of life in the Eastern Districts today. Savannah Pharmacy, your neighborhood pharmacy, located in Countryside Shopping Village, is delighted to offer products and services of real value. Whether it's catering to your family's medical needs or carrying apparel, gifts, and beauty products, Savannah Pharmacy provides you with more than just prescriptions. Remember, they're always just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours, including Sundays and holidays. Savannah Pharmacy. For more information, call 946-3336.
From boat days to beach gatherings, leave the catering to Subway. Choose from small and large sandwich platters, double meat wrap platters, and top it off with optional cookie platters for dessert. Or ask about our Subway box to go with the option of 6-inch or foot-long sandwich, 1 cookie, and 1 bag of chips. For all occasions and celebrations, let Subway focus on the food so you can focus on the fun. Visit subway.ky for catering options. Subway. Eat fresh.
And the whole island is one big party.
Grand Cayman Pirates Fest is here. Taking over Seafarers Way. Saturday, November 12th, Georgetown events start at 1 p.m. with the cardboard boat race and water mermaid showcase. The pirates storm the streets at 3 p.m. followed by the float parade, national song and heritage costume competition, and fireworks show at 9 p.m. A full Saturday of thrills for the entire family, including 8 hours of food festival. Saturday, November 12th, the party takes over Seafarers Way. Afternoon till night. Come for lunch, party a bunch, and pirate the night away.
The offices of dermatologist Dr. Dwayne Porter will be taking appointments from September 30th until October 8th at his Crew Road Clinic. Appointment slots are limited. Whether you're seeking advanced skincare, Botox, filler, cosmetic skin enhancements, or simply looking to reduce wrinkles, Dr. Porter offers a full-service dermatology and dermatological surgery practice. For more information, email dr.portercayman@gmail.com or call 946-9020 to book your appointment today. That is 946-9020.
In this CI Retro's excerpt, during this remembrance period, the focus is on the dangers faced by the Caymanians in the UK Royal Navy Trinidad's operation during World War II. Presented by the Cayman Islands Veterans Association in cooperation with Breeze Radio and Radio Cayman.
Mr. McCoy, were you exposed to any danger at all being based in Trinidad?
Well, while at sea, yes, because doing this anti-submarine work and doing escort or convoying duties, we were exposed knows, outside of the harbor of Port of Spain, it was stated that more ships were sunk just out there than any other part of the Atlantic, because convoys were brought in and convoys taken out, and the submarines just laid around there to get those ships. I've seen a number of them torpedoed. We had to go out there. Our duty really was trying to sweep these areas. When I say sweep, we were sweeping with anti-submarine sounding devices so as to warn ships and to try to help disable ships, you know. And I remember one ship which was being towed. We were escorting that ship when we received a signal from a destroyer, the old Churchill, saying clear the area of the target. And before we could even maneuver, that ship that was being towed was torpedoed. And the tug that was towing her almost went down. She went to where she was, I would say, probably about 35 degrees, you know, with a bowl of water. And one of the men, Ed Tatum from North Side, he's down dead poor fellow, he took a fire axe, and where that wire was running over a bollard, one chop, and he chopped that away. Otherwise, the ship would have carried that tug down.
The preceding was an excerpt from a Radio Cayman's CI Retro program, which focused on the dangers Caymanians faced during World War II, serving in many military operations. Speaking were Doreen Miller, former Radio Cayman's Deputy Director, along with Mr. Harry McCoy, former Royal Navy Petty Officer, and former member of the Cayman Islands Veterans Association. Remember, some gave some, and some gave all their lives. Get your poppy and remember. The preceding was brought to you by the Cayman Islands Veterans Association, Breeze Radio, and Radio Cayman.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us, and an opportunity to share with the listening public some information on two proposed bills that will go for the House in December: the Identification Register Bill 2022, the Cayman Islands Identification Card Bill 2022. And in the studio, the Acting Deputy Chief Officer for the Ministry of Investment, Innovation and Social Development. I wrote it down and make sure I get it. That's under the auspices of the Honorable Andre Ebanks. We have Mr. Charlie Brown, and the Director of E-Government, Mr. Ian Tibbetts, and Trevor Gibbs, the Senior Policy Advisor for Investment Innovation. But Mr. Brown, as we continue discussions, sir.
Thank you, Dwayne. I just wanted, there's been questions we've heard on why. Why have this register? And I just want to start the discussion, and my colleagues will continue it. Obviously, this is an identification document, and it is very important to pull this identification document away from other functions and let it be just an ID. And we never had a document like that in the Cayman Islands. So, for instance, people use their driver's license, and if you cease to drive or lose driver's license, you lose that ID. Similarly with passports, if you don't have a passport because of cost or whatever other implication or a delay in just processing, you lose that identification document. This is an ID that's just an ID. It doesn't have any connected function with it. And I gave earlier a list of the information that would be on this card, and none of that's out of the ordinary. It's found on every ID that we use currently, be it driver's license, your elections card, or your passport. It's and I'll just recap what the basic core is. It's just your first, middle, and surname, date of birth, nationality, sex, immigration status, and the identification code. So this gives us a new leverage, though, in that there's a physical card and then there's digital features. And I'll make Ian talk about that in a little bit.
Yes, please.
But just to start that discussion, I don't know if, Trevor, you want to take the ID gap and just round off other reasons why this is such an important document in addressing elements that are missing in the public.
Sure. So as Charles had mentioned, this national ID card is truly a card for the sole purpose of identifying yourself, for identification. The driver's license can be used as an ID, but it is an indication of whether or not you can drive. If you are not old enough to drive, or if you lose the ability to drive, then obviously that you can't use that document. The same goes for passport, as Charles mentioned. We're here sort of from the innovation division, investment innovation, but the other portion of our ministry, a very important component of the ministry, is social development. And you had some of our colleagues on here not too long ago to discuss the financial assistance legislation and the needs assessment unit, which will soon become the financial assistance department. So we are very aware that there's a number that most of us would be uncomfortable with the size of that number of persons who, for whatever reason, are unable to avail of particular services, not able to get a bank account because they can't identify themselves reliably. Persons who struggle with other forms of identification for a number of reasons. This card is available to everyone in our population, regardless of age, regardless of financial status, regardless of abilities. You can have a card, you can identify yourself. And because of that, you're able to avail of all the services that you would need to efficiently and effectively. So
everybody living and working in the Cayman Islands on a work permit, anyone who's here, presumably just for clarity, not that visitor who may be here for a few weeks or the like.
Everyone who is legally resident in the Cayman Islands.
All right.
Yes.
Now, from that perspective, so that takes care of who is, and then we'd also want to ask how. But Mr. Tibbetts.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'd touch on as well, on that same topic, so it's young persons, older persons, and those with financial challenge or less struggling in different ways that are most prevalent in that identity gap. And let's understand a bit of the potential size of that gap, I think is also important. So if we think about the total number of Caymanians according to the census, persons under the age of 19 and over the age of 70, and it's not a hard and fast, but I'm using breakpoints that were available in the census.
Right.
Make up over a third of the population of Caymanians. So, if you just say that that's the at-risk group in that space for the identity gap, that's how prevalent this could be amongst our own people.
So, for instance, in our focus groups, we heard of stories where an elderly lady needed to transfer money. And doing remittances, you need two forms of identification. Couldn't produce two forms of identification because they didn't accept the voter's ID, for instance, as a proof. So she had her single passport, and they don't accept the voter's ID because it doesn't have an expiry date on it. So that's a gap. She can't perform key services because she doesn't have an ID that meets the qualifications that she needs. On the lower side, on the younger side, more and more kids are not getting driver's licenses right out of high school.
Strange, huh?
It just not the interest, but still need the ability to prove who they are. And it could be much younger than 17. So we're talking maybe 15-year-olds that need to take a proctored exam, for instance, and needs to prove that I am who I am with a photo ID, and possibly needs two of them, or just to say that I exist and don't have access to that ID. This is a unfettered resource that they can have the access to now.
All right. As we go in, sorry, Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to those points that Charles mentioned. Another point that sometimes gets overlooked is the ability for persons to travel within the islands, and in some of those focus groups, particularly the ones that we held in the sister islands. We heard very clearly that it can be difficult for young people in particular to travel from Sister Islands, from Cayman Brac, from the Little Cayman to Grand Cayman, because they may not have gotten a passport yet. They don't have a driver's license, so what they have to do is get a copy of a picture of themselves, go to a notary and have that notary confirm that this is a likeness of that child, go and get a birth certificate of that child, and with those two documents, go to the airport to travel to Grand Cayman.
Yeah. And I mean, I know it's not perhaps part of this discussion, but if I can ask, and thanks very much, Trevor, for raising that. Just today, there was a small discussion amongst, in my mind, very intelligent, socially conscious, engaged in every which way. And there was conflict as to whether you need some sort of ID to travel within the Cayman Islands, so between the Sister Islands, coming to Grand Cayman. And some said, no, I don't need anything. I just got my ticket and I got on. And some said, no, that's not the case. And they were adamant that this is what they did in this year, 2022. Someone said, I just had my passport. Someone said, I just used my driver's license. Someone said, I didn't need anything. And you were saying, if I can ask you before we go to definitively, you need some sort of ID to leave Grand Cayman to go to the Brac, to leave the Brac to go to Little Cayman, inter-island travel. And it can be a driver's license?
It can be a driver's license, yep.
Right. Okay.
But for persons, like I mentioned, it's particularly younger persons.
Yeah.
They don't have a driver's license. They're not old enough to get a voter's ID card, and they may or may not have a passport.
Yeah.
Sometimes for financial reasons, it's not particularly cheap to have a passport. But yes, they do need some.
All right. We got a news break, and every discussion brings further questions, and I know you gents are more than capable and certainly willing to help us to understand. So, to our listeners, please stay tuned and be informed when you return.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman. Your voice, your choice. Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. The Cayman Islands Seafarers Association informs all members that there will be a general meeting on Tuesday, November 15th at 7:30 p.m. in the Seafarers Hall, 11 Victory Avenue in Prospect. In international news, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has accused China of attempting to interfere in the country's elections. Mr. Trudeau accused Beijing of playing aggressive games with democracies and of targeting Canadian institutions. It comes as local media report that Canadian intelligence identified a clandestine network of Beijing-backed candidates at recent elections. At least 11 candidates were supported by China in the 2019 federal elections, officials reportedly told Mr. Trudeau. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman said it has no interest in Canada's internal affairs. An 8-year-old girl's mother and grandparents are being investigated after German prosecutors say she was locked away for 7 years. She was finally freed from the house at the end of September and is now in foster care. Welfare officials say she struggles with everyday tasks like climbing the stairs. German reports say she had never seen a forest or a meadow. Her mother falsely told the authorities that they had moved to Italy. These are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
Radio Cayman is pleased to feature this special Sister Islands historical vignette brought to you by the Ministry of Tourism and Transport. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your Sister Islands.
Hinton Roxroy Connolly was born in Creek, Cayman Brac on 9th September 1937. Fondly known as Big H to his family and friends, following a 5-year career at sea, Mr. Hinton returned to Cayman Brac, taking up work with Brac Power and Light Company for 3 years prior to moving to Grand Cayman, where he commenced employment with Cable and Wireless in March 1966. Big H would eventually move back to Cayman Brac, working his way up from a linesman to a supervisor throughout the 29 years of employment with Cable and Wireless, eventually retiring in August 1994. Following his retirement, Mr. Hinton continued to do electrical work for the many people of Cayman Brac.
Radio Cayman is pleased to feature this special Sister Islands historical vignette brought to you by the Ministry of Tourism and Transport. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your Sister Islands.
Explore your history, explore your land, explore your Sister Islands, the ultimate staycation experience. Your culture, your freedom, the land that time forgot isn't gone. It's your Sister Islands.
Discover all that our Sister Islands have to offer.
For medical lab services in Cayman, go straight to MedLab.
For a full range of medical services, pleasant, clean and comfortable environment, no long lines and affordable fees, visit MedLab at the Smith Road Plaza. Open Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. and half day on Saturdays. Call 949-7331 to make your appointment.
For medical lab services in Cayman, MedLab.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon, welcome back, and thanks for joining us, and thanks too for the opportunity to talk about two proposed bills that will go before the House in December. The Identification Register Bill 2022 and the Cayman Islands Identification Card Bill 2022. The Acting Deputy Chief Officer, Mr. Charlie Brown, Director of Government, Mr. Ian Tibbetts, and I think we've all voted during the break. Yeah, the stalwart, Mr. Trevor Gibbs. Gents, thanks very much. I know for some, this is excitement for them, and for some, just another piece of government bureaucracy, and others have semblance. But I appreciate you taking time to share with us, and hopefully as a country we become more engaged and take advantage of their consultation process. We wanted to ask, as you were talking about, the physical attributes of the card and who's on it. As you told us, anybody who's legal resident here can apply and get it. Now, does that card? Well, let me ask first. And I should have done this before the break, but I didn't want to get on Miss Susan's, other side. Is there anything in the legislation, either of the two proposed bills, that would require you to produce this identification if asked by either a police, immigration, or some authority? Is there anything that would say, okay, you're required to produce this if you're asked?
Nothing in the existing bills. No.
Okay.
And just touching on how you started, as to those that are looking forward to this legislation, I'll give you my own personal experience. My name's Charles Brown. I share my name with my father. There's a few Charles Browns. I look like my brother. There's a lot of confusion between us. Very interesting, right?
Not much at all.
So when we go to secure services or interact with could be government, private sector, they were confused all the time. And having this ID code, it will help in navigating the uniqueness of anybody in the Cayman Islands.
Will this ID replace anything? And in particular, we always reference our passports for those who have. We understand, and thanks, Trevor, for reminding us that you may be a certain age where you don't have your driver's license or you don't have it anymore. But some people may not have a passport for whatever reason. They may have not renewed it. It's not current. But will this card serve anybody in that capacity? Or
it has the potential to. So, as mentioned earlier, the legislative framework that governs other departments and other statutory authorities are still in place. None of that is infringed on by this particular card or the register. But there is the ability now, once you have an ID code, to have that code in other registers. And there could be services, because there's a digital element to this card that I'll ask Ian to touch on, but there is the capability that through one tap, for instance, you could request from an entity that has the authority, the legal authority to do so under their law, to more efficiently pull up services. So you could theoretically see who has a driver's license if there was a connected service, or elections might accept this card at an election because we have the capability of reducing the amount of plastic that we carry through this one card.
I mean, I think, if you take a step back in time, right, and think about it. So you're possibly old enough, not quite as old as me, but possibly old enough to
thank you, sir,
to remember the paper-based driver's licenses, right? And I mean, so funny story is, I actually ended up in Miami with, when we had the paper-based driver's licenses. I also had paper-based electrician's licenses. So I rented a car, and it wasn't until I returned the car that we figured out that they had actually rented me the car on the basis of my electrician's license, not my driver's license. Right? The problem is, the time when those things were relevant, it was because there wasn't the technology that we have today to be able to have information centrally that you can connect the dots between things. So you asked the question about it being able to replace other things. So in places that are leveraging these kinds of technologies, the key is to identify the person, and then you find out whether they have driving privileges, or you find out whether they have voting privileges, or you find out whether they have this. It's so the possibility is absolutely there. I mean, the elections office or elections legislation already says they just ask for an ID. Yes, there is a voter ID, but they just ask for an ID, right? And the key is to link you to the information on their register. Similarly, why do the banks and others, they're not asking for, they're asking for specific forms only because they have legal standing. It's not that they need a specific form generally. And so the possibility for this to replace many of these others locally is significant. I said that, and I want to clarify, that last piece was key, because for a driver's license, for example, a driver's license has a standard format for international purposes and so forth. So you would still need at least a driver's license in the future. However, these are things that we would need to probably amend legislation and practices as over time to be able to leverage on those.
So potentially then, now we have multiple forms of ID, the passport, the driver's license, for instance. If we had this card and we were traveling internationally, we come to other jurisdictions, would we still potentially have to present our national passport, or could this thing be?
So it is not an official international travel document.
Okay.
It does follow the visual format of an international travel document, but their functionalities and features and legal basis and technology that is not incorporated to make it a formal international travel document. So no, it wouldn't. I don't envisage that internationally it would be accepted as a travel document. What I'm not sure of is whether or not it could be accepted here.
And I think that's a matter of choice. And I'll just reiterate that we have a website that is up. It's imagine.egov.ky. Obviously, this is a publication feedback period. We're looking for the public's feedback, so please visit that page. There's commenting sections there where you can leave your thoughts. And one of the areas that we would love to hear, which is this starting points of this discussion, is what are the government services that the public want to see in terms of being able to leverage this card, and how we're talking in many instances about a mature state, but the first services out of the gate, we have some ideas on what we think they should be, but obviously we want to hear the public's views on those, and maybe they might want to travel at least in between the islands, or when they return, be able to talk to say that they returned.
So but taking that point about internationally, so bear in mind our young people, especially they go off to college, etc., internationally, and in the absence of having a driver's license, if they're under 18, the only option is a passport. right? Those passports have to get renewed. Those passports get lost. Those passports get damaged, etc. This, being an official government photo ID, is an alternative for them to use overseas in those cases. It's not a travel document, but it will have legitimate, government photo ID standing. And interestingly, the passport legislation actually does speak to the case where you have a national ID and having to have name alignment between them, etc.
Right. And then if I can ask, because in the proposed card, the way it would be formatted, there's a lot of information, including the picture and the like, and I think immigration status, whether you came on and the like. What sort of information is being collected, and where is it sourced to be able to confirm that NSCCUs, that the person is Caymanian or not? So that's, what do we have?
So the authorities of declaring Caymanian are still intact. That information has to come from the Work Department, Immigration, and that's the authority on that particular field. So therefore, it is sourced from them. Once the register is stood up, and for instance, a new person is born, General Registry would be registering that birth. That child's core information, as we've already described, would then be submitted to the register and enter the register, and that child now would enter. So anytime somebody enters via landing here as a work permit holder, permanent resident, or anybody that's new coming into the island as a work permit holder, they would be entered into the register at that time. And then similarly, any Caymanian or child born in the islands would be entered into the register at the time of birth.
So one thing I want to point out, you mentioned that, and I think it's just from an expression, is a lot of information in the card. Actually, I think the exact opposite is true. The card, for example, the card does not convey, doesn't have address, it doesn't have hair color, eye color, it doesn't have height, it doesn't have disabilities. It doesn't have a lot of the things that are, for example, in the driver's license, even in the voter ID. I think so the card in that sense has relatively minimal information, and that was one of the intentions, is to have an ID document that didn't disclose unnecessary information, and try to respect privacy from that perspective.
So just an example, somebody asks you to prove yourself, you give them your driver's license, and they take a photocopy of it. But then they've photocopied your address, they photocopied your disability. If you have a disability, they photocopy that information. In many cases, just trying to capture who a person is, you've overshared a lot of your personal information without realizing it. Therefore, the physical document, the card, has been scaled back as much as possible, and then we have a digital feature in the form of a QR code on the back of the card that allows the person, the owner of the card, the individual, to disclose turning on or off any of the elements now in the register that they would like to share with any person that they want to share. So it's defaulted as not being any of those fields. All those fields would be off, and then the person can go and turn those fields on.
And I appreciate that, because my question, why I said it that way, was how secure and confidential the card.
Sure.
So that QR code that the person for whom the ID is issued to can control that. How do you turn it on? And can that?
Okay. So, your point about security, because security has to span the entire gamut, right? So there, on the card, there's physical security elements and there's digital security elements. And then in terms of the register, we had to ensure that even though we've gone to great lengths to keep the data set in the register minimalistic, you still need to protect it and protect it well. So we have tried to restrict extensively the number of ways that you can access the register. We've protected the data at rest, protected the data in motion, so encrypted the data, and both when it's just sitting in the database and when it's being shared with someone or etc. Coming on now to the portal, you'll notice, and some people would may not have appreciated it quite so much. We, over the last year and a half, we've introduced something called e-services sign-in, and it has multi-factor authentication, because truthfully, we were behind the times in the level of security that was required to access some online services. And when it's only a case that you're using this just to be able to put in information and get back in at a later point, but there's no exposure, that's fine. We're now, we're moving beyond that, right? You're having the ability to perform customs transactions, which have serious implications if etc. So you need to move beyond the simple security, which is where we're at now. The card also has the ability to take that to another level. I'm sorry, I'll try not to get technical.
No, but please do as much as possible, because
one of the things that e-services sign-in introduced was the concept of multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication being a case where it's not just something someone knows, because then I can try to deduce that, or I can force that information out of someone, or I can socially engineer it to get it. You add an element of something that they know, something that they have, for example, and that's kind of what we've done. The card allows us to also achieve that concept in a different way, because the way it's done today is with a mobile. You can get a text message to your mobile, or you have a mobile authenticator app, etc. With the card, you can also use this. You'll also be able to use this with a reader and the PIN code to be able to authenticate. So you won't. It wouldn't be in future then requiring, if you have the card and you choose to use that, you could not have to put in your username and password, but instead stick the card in a reader, put in the PIN, and authenticate that way. Again, it is something you have, something you know. So it's multi-factor. But the type of technology used is kind of the gold standard in that element of security. There are different standard. There are a number of options right now that are really high standard, but this is one of them.
Right.
And sorry. So let me just try to wrap that back finally to the QR code. So for you to turn on the information you want to share in your QR code, you will have to go through one of those authentication mechanisms to ensure that it would have only been the person that owns that data, that is the data subject, that has access and can choose to share it, to turn it on. Then it's also that person's card that is being used with their ID code too. And just to wrap up finally, that PIN code can be anything from 4 to 16 digits. You can change it every 3 minutes if you want, or every 3 seconds if you're fast enough with the mobile app or on your PC. And if someone tries to brute force the card to figure it out, that feature will permanently lock. And you have to. And I said permanently lock because that also comes back to security. You will have to get a new card.
So we the government have no understanding of the person's PIN. We don't hold that information. That is completely in their control. And as Ian mentioned, if there was a brute force attack and it's locked, the only way to move forward is to replace your card.
Right. And I guess this comes down to an element of trust, right? So can we verify then that who would have access to this information? But first off, it's going to be stored somewhere, and is it who can access it within government or even outside?
So the register information is stored locally. It's stored locally, so it's not in the cloud. Like a lot of people have concerns about cloud. It is stored locally with redundancy, with security. In terms of accessing it, as I've mentioned, there are very limited ways that you can access it, and the methods that you can access it require it to be authenticated and to be logged. And the person themselves can access their information. So that's one of the key elements that goes hand in hand with the portal, that you would be able to access your information from the QR code. So you will be able to log in and see your own information. not only will you be able to see your own information, an element that is being brought, that is in the legislation, is you will also be able to see which entities have access to your information.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a whole new level of transparency that is being introduced. So you know how it's been accessed. Now, so you can access your data because it's yours.
Right.
And then you can consent for another party to access it. For example, we talked about or you can share it, I should say, actually, with the QR code. The other option is that a government entity can access that data, and if it's something that is part of a process that you're conducting and they have a legal basis, that's one thing. Otherwise, it could be a case of you giving consent for them to access it. But the key is you'll know that who accessed it and they're accountable. And we have data protection laws that have some pretty serious teeth.
Yeah, we do.
And that's revolutionary. We've never had a system like this to grant that level of transparency. But part of your question was about access control. So the legislation establishes the Office of the Registrar, and empowers him to maintain this information, but also obligates him to confidentiality in the typical forms that would be in compliance with data protection, and also lists out offenses if there was any violation of said confidentiality.
Okay. And with that, sorry, Joe.
Certainly, I just wanted to chime in very quickly to point out to you, for those of us who might be on YouTube, can see the bags under our eyes. It was a long night. You're watching the eclipse as well, right? Long nights with the team, a very collaborative team, the policy team working very closely with Deputy Chief Officer Brown and Ian and his team, making sure that we had the proper checks and balances in place to make sure that security is there, to make sure that we are meeting as far as we possibly can the standards that we would, because we're citizens as well. This is something that we're going to avail of. And our information, we would want our information to be as secure as anybody's information. And they are thick pieces of legislation. But there's a reason for that, because we have to put in a lot of things. To ensure this. So we really do want and encourage feedback from the public. We encourage people to read, to be knowledgeable about this, because I think once people understand fully that this isn't some piece of technology or some mechanism to try to control, it's in fact the complete opposite. Giving control back to people of their identity, of who they want to share it with. And there's a concept that I'm sure we're going to work on coining it, maybe pop down to the intellectual property office and get it copywritten. But the term, I am me. Charles is Charles. He's not his father. He is Charles Brown. Charles, that's right.
So,
and I also just touch that eGov has done some work on the systems already. We haven't loaded anything into it, but we've already done penetration testing on the existing system, and we will continue to do checks and balances. The industry leading standards. We will conduct those standards. We will maintain the register to those standards, and we will ensure that audits are done to those standards to ensure that people's data are being protected in all of the correct ways as is expected of us.
Right. So, Dewis, you wanted to ask?
Actually, what I wanted to add, really, two things. I want to talk about what's not in the register and what's not on the card, because I think that's also key. I mean, people, you hear the register as a database, and you're like, and we're putting all the information in there. It doesn't have all the information. It doesn't have your any medical data. It doesn't have your financial data. It doesn't have your ownership, property, etc. It's really about identity and information that you quite frequently share with many entities. I mean, how many places do you think have a photocopy of your driver's license or your passport, right? The voter ID, they're world over. voter registers are normally a public document, right? And they have the things that are on the card or that are in the register in them, in those public documents. So it's not. We tend to have that thinking that it's a ton of information, but the reality is it's not. It's information that is quite commonly shared, etc. Now, I think where the key comes in, though, and where this really starts to benefit, is when we start to leverage the identity code, because that's where you get back to this Charles Brown coming into the hospital and being treated as the right Charles Brown, and not given medication that he's allergic to because they think it's someone else, or vice versa.
Or needing to have somebody with me to clarify which Charles Brown it is.
Right. So there's that element of it. But the information in the his record at the hospital does not need to come back towards the center at all, because all the thing that's relating the two pieces of, or the two types of information is the ID code. Today, we try to relate it with the names and date of birth, and if that's not a tiebreaker, then we go to place of birth. But that's very risky, because then you're using the full set of names, so you transpose a middle and first name, and you got problems, or vice versa, or
even the spelling sometimes of the same.
Someone's been married and now using a different last name. All of these things go, so. But the key is if you start to be able to relate to the right person in different places, different entities, without having to put all of their information in one place.
Right. As we go into the break, let me then ask, you were talking about the information being accessed, and let's just use government entities. The user, the owner of the ID would know who, which and when has been accessed. But can these, whether it's the police, the prison, the immigration, a government ministry, the post office, they will access it? Can they just access it? So, do they need to go through a request? So how?
So the registrar controls access to the register, and there are multiple checks and balances there in granting that permission. Obviously, this would be electronically done, so it's the approval of the query.
An approach.
Yes, and an approach. And there's also obviously also a data controller on the other side, that on the requesting entity side. So yes, there's a discussion before access would be granted. But I also want to point out, because you mentioned police, and you mentioned a few entities that have investigative capability.
Thank you, Ketchum.
Right, and there obviously still needs to be the ability to conduct investigations without the tipping off a person that an investigation is being conducted. And we've built into this legislation the checks and balances for that as well. So yes, if the police, for instance, was conducting an investigation on you, and that was not logged against your register in a way that you personally could see it, the authority with oversight still has access and the power to request that information. It's still logged in the same way, but just separately.
And I think the one thing to point out is the legislation. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Charles, because I'm less on the legislation side. I'm more more in planning and implementation, right? Yeah. But the legislation that relates to those powers for the echoes what is in the Data Protection
That's correct.
Act,
That's right.
which is is that universal scenario. It's a standard provision. It's not like we're giving them the distinction here is that this method, the fact that it has been accessed is recorded in such a way that it can be that an oversight body or a regulator can still actually ensure that the right things were being done and it was used for the right purposes.
Right, and I appreciate that. And explaining that, I think Mr. Brown, you make us think of the existing scenarios where information, let's say the investigative arm of government looking for information, would they be required to go to the courts and get that? So maybe when we come back, we can talk more about it, and hopefully allay people's fears, answer some of their burning questions. All right, stay tuned for Talk Today.
Subway makes it easy for you to stay on top of your health and wellness goals with our Fresh Fit menu options. Choose from 5 Fresh Fit Subway sandwiches with only 450 calories or less per 6-inch sub. Turkey breast, veggie, oven roasted chicken, black forest ham, sweet onion chicken teriyaki, or make your 6-inch Fresh Fit sub into a salad or wrap prepared with fresh vegetables. For a full menu and nutritional information, visit subway.ky. Subway, eat fresh.
And the whole island is one big party, party, party.
Grand Cayman Pirates Fest is here. Taking over Seafarers Way. Saturday, November 12th, Georgetown events start at 1 p.m. with the cardboard boat race and water mermaids showcase. The pirates storm the streets at 3 p.m. followed by the float parade, national song and heritage costume competition, and fireworks show at 9 p.m. A full Saturday of thrills for the entire family, including 8 hours of food festival. Saturday, November 12th, the party takes over Seafarers Way. Afternoon till night. Come for lunch, party a bunch, and pirate the night away.
Health Services Authority is now offering online payment options for patients. Patients of HSA can now pay their bills, including deposits, towards scheduled services online at payments.hsa.ky. The secure, new online payment system accepts debit or credit cards and is in addition to the available payment options of cash, check, and online bank transfer. For quick, easy, and secure payment directly from your phone or computer, visit HSA's new online payment system at payments.hsa.ky.
Freedom, Cayman Brack. Freedom, Little Cayman. Soft breezes, blue waters, no traffic. Unwind and rejuvenate your mind, body, and soul. Sister Island Staycations, a taste of freedom. Discover all that our sister islands have to offer.
Did you know that ValueMed Pharmacy has a free online prescription service? Managing your health and medical requirements has never been easier with ValueMed. Simply visit value-medpharmacy.com. That's VALU-medpharmacy.com and click the Refill Prescriptions tab on our website. Fill in the information for new prescriptions or refills and choose your preferred pickup location. ValueMed on Walkers Road or Town. Then bring in your original prescription from your doctor when picking up. There's no need to stand in line and wait for your prescription. Save time and pick up prescriptions at your convenience by visiting value-medpharmacy.com. That's VALU-medpharmacy.com.
In order to assist with the development of local farming, the Department of Agriculture would like to remind farmers of the on-farm artificial insemination services available for cattle, goats, and pigs. For more information on the service requirements or schedule an assessment appointment, contact the DOA's Veterinary Services section at 916-2218.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon, welcome back, and thanks for listening. And we really appreciate you respecting the request, and hopefully through this, opportunity to educate and inform you, encourage you to be a part of the consultation process for 2 proposed bits of legislation that will go before the House in December: the Identification Register Bill 2022 and the Cayman Islands Identification Card Bill 2022. As Acting Deputy Chief Officer, Mr. Brown, in the Ministry for Innovation, was it Investment, Innovation, and Social Development? I like that term. When is the consultation period ending? And then secondly, how can people provide their feedback?
Sure.
Yeah, it's on. Yes, sir.
So it is intended that the debate will start around the 5th of December. So any period up to that point, we will be collecting information through our website. We definitely would like citizens and residents of our beautiful country to visit imagine.egov.ky You can access the bills there. You can see videos there that explain these concepts a bit more, and there's information that's being added there all the time. And there's also the opportunity there to leave your comments, and we really welcome the opportunity to have that information given to us in however our people feel that it should be expressed.
Okay. We wanted to also ask, and just prior to you were sharing with us, we wrote down the auditing and oversight. So some of us, that's the world we come from. We have I would imagine a new post created as a register is implemented, but is there some sort of audit and oversight of that to make sure that there's proper access to it, any issues that may have transpired, if so, who's it reported to, what's the accountability, those sorts of things?
So the PSML, as the person will be a civil servant, has to be a civil servant under the bill. The PSML will govern that. But the law the bill does lay out very specific items on confidentiality that need to be respected in terms of how data is handled and duties of secrecy around data.
Okay. And then now one of our callers that we had referenced earlier, looked at it and thought, well, fingerprinting, we get a full ID, but where does fingerprints, if any?
It's a very interesting question, and we've conducted multiple focus groups. We've met with nearly 24 entities total in our consultation period. This is a polarized issue. There are members of the public that feel that fingerprints should be on the register and central from a security perspective, and then there's the opposite perspective, that is fingerprinting is too invasive and a step too far. At this, we have rested that this is an identification register, and it doesn't necessarily need to have fingerprinting to be able to identify who you are. It doesn't need to be anything more than the information that we've listed in terms of names and a photo that allows you to be recognized. So therefore, fingerprinting is not on the register. Disabilities even is not on the register. Now there could be for the disabled. That again was another issue where some people felt that it should be on the register, and some feel that it shouldn't. And different countries have included it on their register, and others haven't. So if there was, as Ian was alluding, that the ID code can be placed in other registers. We're talking about a cancer register. I think was just talked about in the paper recently as kind of coming back up as a necessary element. If that person's ID code was in that particular register, or any register that needs to be referenced to an individual, it could. But on the register itself, this identification register, it doesn't have to have a whole lot of information. It doesn't have to contain all this information.
Sorry, and I think where it comes into is really it depends on the purpose of these things. So if you need to maintain a record of persons that have disabilities, and you need to, then obviously it's a person, so they have an identity that you need to be able to identify them. But to try to keep data separated and to minimize the exposure and the risk on the data, that's where it comes in. That you could just you could have a code, and associated with that code could be their disability, and that code, for example, may not even be the format of the number itself. It may be something else, that incorporates that. But the key is that it can be related with, if you have the right information.
And there's efficiencies to be gained with that. So when a register or a database is set up that is monitored, managed by the source of truth, where do you declare that you have a disability? With a medical practitioner. That really should sit with them. The fact that DVDL has to record your disability, and let's say it was a temporary disability, then you have to go and get a clearance from a doctor to then come back to this government entity to get that removed. That's a level of inefficiency that we don't need. Currently, that's how it had to be set up because of the technology we had at present. But this is the leverager that can be a game changer in that way, where we can have this the true separation of maintenance and uses and purpose.
Yeah, we see the security features in the card relative to, say, the voter's ID. And Mr. Brown, you referenced earlier at the outset the sort of the mandatory things, and then there are some, optional things. And then Mr. Tibbet, you said about the cardholder can share those optional things that are there. Height, weight, color, your eyes, preference for chocolate versus all those other optional things. How is that access, and when it's shared, sort of its purposes?
Well, I'll touch on that in two ways. So in our briefing with the media recently, it was mentioned that when the person was taking around a card, they felt like it was a preloaded form, like they carry around a preloaded form in their pocket, and that really gives the indication that talks to the efficiency of how quickly a form could be filled out. And we're talking about the digital and doing things online, but that isn't the only scenario that we are referencing. Yes, you could use this for single sign-on. Yes, you can use this to build even more secure banking environments where you wanted to depend on the national ID if that entity so chose. But having a card allows our elderly, those that are in the our populace that have limitations in terms of access currently, may have difficulty filling out a form. They could access services, fill out information that much quicker and accurately just by having this card. So in terms of sharing, the use of this is a game changer from that perspective. Just repeat the last part of your question.
And I see the great reduction in potential reduction in red tape in terms of filling out things and sharing information across, but the additional optional information that is in there when the person is sharing that. The card gives us basic information, and some of us are very, very cognizant of, I refuse as a public disclosure. Someone wanted a copy of my driver's license, and I said no. They looked at me and said, tell me why you need to take a copy. Right.
So given that the card is optional, if you don't want to participate, that's the first level, and obviously the most limiting. We obviously would try to encourage our citizens to participate with the card because of all of the efficiencies that are gained by it. And we haven't even talked about digital signing yet.
And we will after the break.
But that's level one. Level two is the QR code, where everything is default off. And if you wanted to share minimal information, you have access to your portal. You can turn on the basic features that you wanted. So if you wanted your address to be shared just by QR code and a person or an entity scanning that, they could do so. We'll get to a more elaborate discussion on assurance, but there's concepts of verified address actually in here as well. And in a mature state, we could have this process take on some of the KYC elements that would satisfy address and the maintenance of address. And then there is the actual sharing with government entities where, again, if the card was put into a card reader for the services that they have legal remit to conduct, that information could be passed on. And that would all be documented on the person's register so that they can see that information. If the person does not want to, say, put in their telephone address, does not want to put in their principal place of address, they don't have a mandate to do so.
So, you said something just now. Sorry, to run out of time.
Yeah, she wanted to take a break, but are you not going to miss your point? Yeah.
So you said something just now that I think was very pertinent. You as a person that's understanding the Data Protection Act and your rights under that to not disclose information, etc. The card is in your possession. Will be in your possession.
Right.
You choose how you use the card, when you use the card, if you use the card. So you don't. If you don't give someone the card, they never see it. You lock this away in a safe, it never sees the light of day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, the control is with the person that the card is to. The sharing, the same way you can turn it on, you can turn it off. But we envisage advanced features coming that are not ready yet. But things like being able to set the information on for a period of time. So it's only on for the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then it goes back to off. We have my team is very creative, and they're I'm sure they're listening and worrying, what's EM going to sell now that we have to deliver, right? But they because they have these, they think about how can we help our people,
mm-hmm.
and understanding what they're citizens as well, and understanding what the needs are. But if you think about a scenario like you have an employee letter today where you can generate to say that I am employed with Given government, and this is salary or this is whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a PDF, a certified PDF, digitally signed PDF by the government that you can choose to say, okay, I'm going to share my names, not my address, but I'll share my telephone number. And those are things that that will be coming, that we anticipate will come down the road. And again, the control is in your hands, how you choose to do that.
All right.
I want to just touch on one other point.
Suzanne's going to kill it.
Sorry, Suzanne. It is the capability for entities to ask a question rather than get a document and make a deduction. So if you need to know that somebody's over 18, you don't have to ask them for their ID really and see that they were born in X year. It's really just asking the question over digitally, is the person over 18? And you get back a response, yes, no. And that paradigm shift is huge in terms of data minimization and sharing more data than you need.
Yeah. All right. Let's pause, and I can see the excitement, man. And you and your team must be like, yeah, go on. All right. When they come back, stay with us.
Come celebrate 53 years with big savings. Brand Source Home Gallery invites you to their 53rd anniversary sale. 1 week only, November 7th to 12th. Save up to 40% off store-wide. Sale discounts on appliances, lighting and fans, faucets, sinks, kitchen cabinets, custom closets, mattresses, housewares, and more. Come get inspired by inspiring luxury as Brand Source Home Gallery celebrates 53 years with a sale till November 12th. 209 Dorsey Drive in Industrial Park. Call 623-5000.
It's Tuesday, and you know what that means. It's 2-for-1 Taco Tuesdays, and it's happening all day long at Taco Restaurant and Bar, located in East End and West Bay. Who doesn't love tacos, especially when they're 2-for-1, featuring specialty tacos like peanut chicken, blackened fish, pulled pork, vegetarian and coconut shrimp, and of course, all of your favorites. Enjoy 2-for-1 tacos and 2-for-1 margaritas every Tuesday at Taco Restaurant and Bar, all day long in East End and West Bay.
Busy, busy, busy. Feel like there's not just enough hours in the day. Savannah Pharmacy, service to make your life easier. Now you can WhatsApp your prescription order to 929-5045. And pickup is just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours including Sundays and holidays. WhatsApp your prescription order to 929-5045. Savannah Pharmacy, wholesome values with modern conveniences.
For medical lab services in Cayman, go straight to MedLab.
For a full range of medical services, pleasant, clean and comfortable environment, no long lines and affordable fees, visit MedLab at the Smith Road Plaza. Open Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. and half day on Saturdays. Call 949-7331 to make your appointments.
For medical lab services in Cayman, MedLab.
Ahoy, mateys! Enjoy a jolly day out with the whole family at Cayman Turtle Center's Pirates Fest Family Fun Day on Sunday the 20th of November. Explore the wildlife, ride the water slide, splash in the lagoon, hunt for treasure and enjoy activities for the whole family. The fun takes place from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Costumes are encouraged and kids 12 and under in costume get free admission. Don't miss all the pirate festivities at Cayman Turtle Center on Sunday, November 20th. Harg.
Hello, Cayman Islands. This is Carly Davis. Come and enjoy an evening of thanksgiving and praise at Cayman Gospel Fest on Saturday, November 19th at the Lions Center. Come see Cayman's best performers and church choirs. My band and I will be there. Admission is free. See you Saturday, November 19th at the Lions Center with Cayman Gospel Fest. You cannot afford to miss it. Yes, come out and let's have fun together.
Brought to you by the Progressives, celebrating 20 years of service to the Cayman Islands.
When you're craving something big, something tasty that gives you that lip-smacking satisfaction, something that hits the spot, there is nothing better than a footlong from Subway.
It's pretty tasty.
Filling and full of flavor. Try our new sweet onion steak teriyaki with a twist. Or the classic chicken teriyaki. Top it with green pepper, onions, cheese, and that sweet onion teriyaki sauce, all piled on your favorite artisanal bread. Satisfy that craving with a footlong from Subway.
Fresh, delicious, tasty, meaty.
Let's make it a meal with a drink, chips, and cookies. There is nothing better than a footlong from Subway.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back, and thanks for joining us. And thanks too for the opportunity to speak to two proposed bills that will come to the House in December. The identification register bill. Identification register bill. That's what you call it, Mr. Brown?
Identification.
Right, and the Cayman Islands identification card bill. And the two go hand in hand. Maybe it's not to ask of you, but sometimes we see increasingly, two complementary pieces of legislation. Sometimes we wonder why one couldn't be part and parcel of the other, why there are two pieces. So there's the card, and then there's the actual register as well.
So the identification code that's assigned to every individual that has a right to reside in Cayman is it happens with the register, the registration, the identification register bill. But the card is a real leverager of opportunities and access to services, and is the continuation of being able to leverage the benefits of the register and giving persons that control. So they're tied in that you need to be in the register to have an ID card.
Okay. We have a listener. Well, gents, if I put on the glasses, I can't hear you. If I don't put them on, I can't see you. Or see what to read. So let me read this. This thing called, anyway, it also will be the age of Mr. Tibbetson. This listener asks, writes it this way. It says, please confirm if this national ID is mandatory or voluntary. I know we spoke to it earlier, but just quickly. Voluntary or national?
It's voluntary.
Okay.
So, yes.
Okay. And back to something that we were speaking to earlier. Isn't travel to the Sister Islands akin to travel to any other district? Now, we said prior, the individuals who may not have some sort of travel, some sort of ID, passport or driver's license, may not be able to, or may have challenges. So is that something that we would venture? No, we will pose that question to another entity, but just from your perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, I think obviously this is more of a question for Airports Authority and Civil Aviation and so forth. But I think at a cursory level, what I could say is obviously we share our domestic and international airport terminals. So, oftentimes when you run into those kinds of scenarios, you have to adhere to the highest standard of security, even for the areas that you could, could be more lenient with. And I suspect that's a key part of this, but I can't speak authoritatively to it.
All right, and before I read the other question, let me just continue what is and talking about travel being akin to another district. So why would Caymanians have to present an ID? Is this also required for those traveling to the back by boat, for example, to participate in a fishing tournament? So we can see the thoughts of some. All right. Says good day. In the past, we had picture IDs for work permit holders. Then this requirement fell away. Will the national ID be mandated for work permit holders?
It will be optional, just as it is for any
Okay.
particular person.
So it is still optional for everybody. It's available to anyone we said who's legal or resident here, right? And
So, but interestingly, when we did the focus groups, because we obviously we looked at the spectrum of society in Cayman, and when we did the focus groups, the foreign persons were generally they were familiar with it from their home country, but they were but two things I think that we heard that stood out in my mind was they saw the benefit of it and would express that they would be looking to get it when available, and two, they did, coming back to the point you ask about not about mandatory or optional.
Yeah.
They said, well, how do you have what they refer to as a national ID, and it
It's
not mandatory, right? But I think we also had to recognize the feedback from our society, and there were differences of opinion on this. It's a quite polarized topic of whether we should or shouldn't have mandatory IDs.
So I'll just speak very briefly to some of the compelling arguments for. Health insurance is a requirement. Pensions is a requirement. There are those that have life insurance, and the list goes on and on. There's some legal mandates that these are required things. But when people change services, when they go between providers, how do you reliably connect the dots if you've had multiple pension schemes taken out by different entities?
All right. So, Mr. Tibbetts, we're going to go to the news break. Interoperability was one of the words that we said earlier that we will talk about later. So maybe we come back, we can talk about some of that, and maybe just emphasize some of the potential red tape across government services that we could be reducing when we look for the efficiencies.
Definitely.
All right. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
Follow Radio Cayman on Twitter. All the latest information, breaking news, community events, and more. Follow us at twitter.com/Radio Cayman.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman, your voice, your choice.
Local, regional, international. This is headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankins-Ollins. The Cayman Islands Seafarers Association informs all members that there will be a general meeting on Tuesday, November 15th at 7:30 p.m. in the Seafarers Hall. The Seafarers calendars for 2023 are also now on sale in the office, and district days for seafaring heritage are starting from November 15th to November 29th. In international news, Norway's Princess Martha Louise has relinquished her royal duties to focus on her alternative medicine business with her fiancé, a self-styled shaman. The princess will keep her title but is surrendering official duties to create a clearer dividing line between her private and royal role. Her fiancé, Durek Verrett, has promoted unfounded medical practices, including suggesting cancer is a choice. Spain's former king Juan Carlos is seeking legal immunity in a UK appeals court over harassment claims brought by his ex-mistress. She accuses the ex-king of spying on and harassing her after their relationship broke down in 2012. The former king, who abdicated in 2014, denies any wrongdoing. Juan Carlos, who lives in the United Arab Emirates, did not attend the hearing, and a ruling is expected in several weeks. These are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankins-Ollins.
For the latest in news and information,
Follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
And the whole island is one big party, party, party.
Grand Cayman Pirates Fest is here. Taking over Seafarers Way. Saturday, November 12th, Georgetown events start at 1 p.m. with the cardboard boat race and water mermaids showcase. The pirates storm the streets at 3 p.m. followed by the float parade, national song and heritage costume competition, and fireworks show at 9 p.m. A full Saturday of thrills for the entire family, including 8 hours of food festival. Saturday, November 12th, the party takes over Seafarers Way. Afternoon till night. Come for lunch, party a bunch, and pirate the night away.
For medical lab services in Cayman, go straight to MedLab. Blood test, x-ray and mammogram, all of that is MedLab. Affordable fees and friendly service, a full professional team. MedLab is always comfortable, MedLab is always clean. For medical lab services in Cayman, MedLab.
A caring and community spirit, cherished family and cultural values. These are some of the things that still embodies the Caymanian way of life in the Eastern Districts today. Savannah Pharmacy, your neighborhood pharmacy, located in Countryside Shopping Village, is delighted to offer products and services of real value. Whether it's catering to your family's medical needs or carrying apparel, gifts, and beauty products, Savannah Pharmacy provides you with more than just prescriptions. Remember, they're always just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours, including Sundays and holidays. Savannah Pharmacy. For more information, call 946-3336.
Commuters are advised that until Wednesday, November 9th, Seafares Way between Fort Street and Goring Avenue will be open to one-way traffic for works. The road will be open to southbound traffic from 4 p.m. until 7 p.m. and northbound traffic from 7 p.m. until 4 p.m. For more information, you can follow the Georgetown Revitalization Initiative on Facebook and also on Instagram.
Tune in Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. for the Daily Sports Report, covering local, regional, and international sports. Proudly brought to you by Dr. Wayne Porter, offering a full-service dermatology and dermatological surgery practice. Call 946-9020 to book your appointment today.
The Department of Environmental Health would like to advise West Bay residents to get their bulk waste ready for collection from November 7th to the 12th. Household appliances, furniture, and other items too large to be handled by the weekly DEH collection crews should be placed by the roadside where it is easily accessible to DEH collection crews. Metals and vegetation should also be separated from other bulk items. Do not obstruct the roadway or storm drains or place tires, construction and demolition waste, hazardous materials, or electronics. For more information on the West Bay bulk waste collection from November 7th to the 12th, please contact DEH's Solid Waste Management Team at 949-6696.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waging to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back, and thanks for joining us. And the consultation period is available. So please imagine, was it?
Imagine.egov.ky.
Imagine.egov.ky. So, Charlie Brown, if you were about a man, you could sing that. Imagine a people.
Yeah, I leave certain things, right?
I know. A little laughter makes the medicine go down. But we're talking today, Acting Deputy Chief Officer in the Ministry of Investment, Innovation and Social Development, Mr. Charlie Brown. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for having us.
Together with, the Director of Government, Mr. Tibbetts, really appreciate it. And I think the votes are in. I mean, this is kind of like, the Masked Singer. Thank you very, very, very much, Mr. Trevor, for being part of it. And I think having youth and intellect and enthusiasm, you can stay up all night and get the bags on the eyes. Much easier than the seniors, like Mr. Tibbetts.
I'm very happy to be here.
He don't know my gray hair is a part of disguise.
I see why I don't. People realize that our age is too close. When you were talking earlier about the paper driver's license, I remember having to produce that one time, and I think they also had a provisional license that was very much almost the same as the full. Mm-hmm. And if you wasn't careful, you can mix the one up and the other. So luckily, you had the electrical sort of qualifications that you could get officially recognized. My thing was like, what is this? Did you get this in primary school? It was handwritten. It didn't look official at all, man.
Yeah.
But for us, man, it was golden.
You better have it if you got stopped.
You better have it. Boy. But these two bills, the identification register bill and the identification card bill, a couple of things that we were talking to earlier, and the efficiencies and interoperability, and Mr. Tibbetts, help us to understand potentially, how this could be so beneficial.
Okay, so let me speak first to interoperability, then it'll come on to digital signatures. Mm-hmm. Interoperability, it's really, it's about system to system communication.
Mhm.
You know, when we say interoperability, we're talking about system X, working with system Y.
Mhm.
Let me give you an example of how this has been already implemented and making a significant difference for us. So, when British Overseas Territory Citizenship Naturalization or Registration,
Mhm.
it used to be that how you got through that process was you went to immigration department and you got this printout, and if you were a frequent traveler, a large printout of all of your travel history from them, which identified what flights you left on, what flights you came in on, what days you went, etc. You then carried this over to the Office of the Deputy Governor. So somebody had to go through the process of generating that and providing that, and customers are the experience at the counter to get that and all like this, the paper. Then you get to the Deputy Governor's office. Somebody again has to deal with you and takes that now, and they get to rekey that into something like Excel, etc. All to get to figure out, were you in Ireland on a particular date, and B, were you out of the islands more than X days in
Y
a
period.
5-year period,
Yeah.
a Y period. But in the process, the Office of the Deputy Governor team now got access to all this information about you, when you went, when you traveled, where you, etc. Today, with interoperability, the Office of the Deputy Governor's system, when you apply, it says, okay, Sterling Dwayne, it asks the immigration system, Sterling Dwayne, was he on Ireland on this date? Yes. No. That's it. Was how many days off island in this period? And he gets back a number. So nobody is now having to do all of this printing and rekeying. The privacy is maintained because the only thing they know is a number. They don't know whether that was one trip or 50 trips or whatever. All of this kind of thing is so.
And the citizen didn't have to be a runner to get that information from A to B.
Right. So it benefits the person themselves. It benefits government, obviously. It benefits the environment because now we're getting rid of all that paper. It has significant benefits. So, but that's a concept about interoperability. It's the ability for one system to ask a question of another system, a very specific question, and get a very specific answer. Obviously, there's levels of security, and we've implemented a system that was developed and used by Estonia, called based on their platform called the X Road, and it was developed specifically for this purpose of interoperability. It is now overseen by the Nordic Institute of Interoperability, and it's continued to develop. We have our own implementation here. We're not dependent on anyone else for it, etc. So that's interoperability. But think of how that applies now with the register. So someone needs to know that a person is over a particular age to get a service. The system that needs to know that can ask the question of, is this person over 18, and get a yes or no. They don't have to get their date of birth. They don't have to get their address. They don't have to get all this stuff. It can be a subset of the data that is in the register that is being queried and a response being given, or something derived from that data in the register. That is. The other possibility with interoperability is you don't necessarily have to disclose the information so that, they get information that they didn't know. But if I told them that my address was then they could the inquiry could be confirmed that this is the right address. These are all the kinds of things that can be done with interoperability. Now, if I move on to digital signatures, right? So most of us have used computers or even mobile phones, have used some form of electronic signature. The most common one being a stored image of our handwritten signature, which is highly insecure, easily duplicated, etc. Then if you move up the ladder from there, you get to what I would consider it's called intermediate standard, which is based on cryptography, but it's something that's installed on your computer, and so you can only use it from your computer or the computers these are installed on. But anyone else access to that computer, there's a risk, an element of risk there. Now, the next piece is the next level is when you move to what we call a secure signature, secure qualified signature. And this is what you get with the card. The fact that the signature can only ever be applied by having possession of the card and knowledge of the valid PIN for the card.
Yeah, so
and that the certificate that's required for that can't be exported from the private key can't be exported from the card. It can't be duplicated. It's one-off. So if that signature was applied, that person had this card and knows the PIN, knew the PIN for that card at that time. But how does that impact us? So we did a quick exercise. Today, a very common thing is you'll receive something from your insurance company, your bank, your and to say to you, sign and return. So what are you going to do? You're going to print it, you're going to sign it, you're going to scan it back in, you're going to email it. Very common process in business and in private life. So we did a test in the office at the administration building. Someone was already logged into their computer. They opened the file, sent it to print. Just a single page file, sent it to print, walked to the printer about 30 feet away, no queue, no delays, receive the print, sign it, scan it back in to themselves, and get back to their computer and now go to email that document. We compared that to applying the digital signature to the same document with the ID card using the mobile app on an iPhone. And the difference was 2 minutes and 6 seconds doing it with the old print, sign, scan, email approach versus 40 seconds. And this wasn't someone trying to, really trying to set a time record. This was repeatable. 40 seconds with the card. So what does that mean? That 86-second difference, and that's a single signature on a document. For someone that signs 3 documents a day, 5 days a week, so someone working, fairly common, that will equate to 2 working days a year saved for that person. In Estonia, they're much more accustomed. It's the norm for them. They've been doing it for many more years. They've computed that the ID card and signature is worth 5 working days per person on average in their population.
You know what? Maybe that translates to 5 extra vacation days.
There's very few times the government can give back like this, and we're giving back in efficiency.
Right. No, with that, and I want to just revisit. We're talking about turning on and off the features. The individual can do that. Maybe I read too much novels. Maybe I watch the media too much. Who knows? But there are backdoors, we're told, in all sorts of programmings, presumably. And can any entity access this information unbeknownst to the cardholder, the individual, to turn on and turn off, to access things? I mean, that may seem like one of those questions you leave for the BBC to ask, but we'll pretend like we're there.
It's so 2 things. It's technology and it's security, right? And security is a cat and mouse game. It is, you're trying to stay ahead. So there's no such thing as absolute security. It is your security is great until it's not great. So what you can't do is say it's secure and I don't do anything further. You have to continually advance with your security, and that's the norm. It is a database. It is a system. By that very nature, it can be there's the possibility. However, we've put in place the appropriate security measures, as you would do. I mean, it's the same thing that you do for everything else that you have out there, whether it is the immigration database, or the elections, the voter register, or it is the systems in the bank. Same thing, right? It's you. They are technical systems, so technically it is possible, but you've put in place, you've locked as many of the doors as possible and really restricted it down. So I know that the only way into this studio is through that door or that door, so I only have those two doors to guard.
Unless
right?
we tell you about the secret door.
Right. Yeah.
So,
And you guard that, so you then protect those, and you put controls in place to make sure that anything that only the right people come in with the right motives and so forth. And that's the digital, that's the analog equivalent of what's been done basically. So we put in place security. The way that you'll access this system, the register between systems, is via that interoperability solution, which incorporates quite a bit of security. The way that you will access the data yourself is via the portal with all the layers of security that we have in place, and the multi-factor authentication. So I mean, no one can ever sit here and honestly tell you that
100%.
There's absolute no possibility.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is we have taken appropriate measures, and then we turn around. We apply these measures, and then we test them, right? And I think this is also something that the civil service obviously, has different times had different reputations, and one of the things that people wouldn't know about is some of the achievements around particularly security space. I mean, we've literally had the security persons in the civil service that have detected what they call zero-day vulnerabilities in applications. And basically that is something no one else has ever discovered and as a vulnerability. So we do quite a bit of testing.
Right. And going on the premise that the legislation as proposed will be passed and the like, what sort of time frame looking at this thing come into force?
So
not everyone one time.
Hot potato.
So when we go to Parliament in early December, and then if the debate goes well and the legislation is passed, certain elements of the legislation will come into effect fairly immediately. The elements that will allow the register to be stood up, to be populated. From there, we're expecting about 6 months for Ian and team to work out any additional functionality that they need to get everything clicking and going as it should, before we then are in a position to start opening up for applications to the card, and for the public to start consuming those services.
And then I'm going to premise then that across the government entities, this would then be rolled out. We'll be able to use it with our card and benefit from the reduced red tape, the increased efficiencies and like.
So there will be obviously government entities consuming this, but I think a point that we may have touched on but haven't specifically said, we fully expect and anticipate that private sector entities will be consuming this as well and be utilizing the card for services we touched on, banks. We've been in conversations preliminarily with two of the larger commercial banks in Cayman retail banks. We have had preliminary conversations with SEMA, who have been fantastic in accommodating us, in meeting with us, to work together towards what Deputy Chief Officer Brown alluded to, which was trying to have this card meet most, if not all, KYC requirements, so that availing of services with banking, with insurance, getting yourself squared up with government services can all be done very, very efficiently, one stop with the card.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the things that So we're excited about the digital features and so forth, right? But one of the things that I think is often overlooked is you come back to that identity gap we talked about, is just the card in its physical form being a valid government official photo identification document. And that won't, the use cases of that now, expand significantly because you now have a government issued photo ID. So just using it in its physical format should be something that is pretty universal, both in public sector and private sector. It's when you start to get beyond now into the digital capabilities. The digital signature, so what we're pushing, literally I came from a leadership conference this morning, and I just gotten through talking to the leaders about saying, let's make sure we get our plans in place to accept digitally signed forms and to also use digital signatures ourselves and to embrace this technology. We're working with solutions that will accommodate that. But like anything else, it's also going to take a finite amount of time because you talked about security just now. We also have to implement and test and implement and test and make sure that those things are in place. So I'm confident that there will be applications out the gate that when we start issuing cards, but it will continue to grow and expand both in, I believe, public sector and private sector quite rapidly.
Right. Just I think we may have sort of at least alluded to or explained it, but just to recap, one of our listeners was asking, and in asking the question, I sort of draw the parallel to the use of a credit card. So we go to the merchant, we either tap it or we put in our PIN. I go into the bank or to one of the government agencies. Listen to this.
Yeah. So that's exactly where we see the efficiencies coming when you're dealing with, being able to use this in its physical form to say, okay, the information that's on my card, they can read the machine readable zone with an optical scanner, and and let that populate their system, or they can read the card with a card reader with a chip, now for security reasons, you can read the card, the data that's on the front of the card, you can read that from the chip contactless, so by tap. However, for security reasons, you also have to have consumed the machine readable zone. It's so that for privacy, persons can't. It's the same. It's exactly the same as a passport type scenario.
Right. Okay.
Because person sitting in an airport trying to pull information from a card from a person that just walked by. That's the security feature that prevents that.
Because your passport has a similar chip in it, right?
Yeah. And from that perspective, then cards that are lost or stolen, or even with credit cards again, their expiry dates, driver's license, those two things relative to this ID card.
Okay, so the card does have an expiry date. The card, to achieve a balance of cost and functionality, we have gone with a card that has a 5-year lifespan. So hence the card is designed and the expiry date is 5 years, up to 5 years. If the card is lost or stolen, you can have the digital signature and authentication features disabled. They can be disabled remotely because how that works. And then, but we'll have facilities for you to report the card lost and stolen, and the law outlines what's required there, etc.
That remote ability to sort of disable it, is that on the individual or an entity?
So the individual will have capabilities to do that, and or they can contact the government, the registrar to have it done.
All right,
but the individual will be able to do it.
All right. Sort of like calling your credit card company and just say, hey,
There's the ability to suspend. So, for instance, if you feel that you've lost it, but you don't think it's in anybody's particular hands, you just don't know exactly where it is, you could suspend it, and then there's provisions to re-engage that, and then there's outright cancellation.
Okay. Yeah. And then what about the case where, since the card is going to be available to everybody, irrespective of what's the legal here, of age or the like. Let's get the case that the person is a work permit holder, has decided for whatever reason is no longer in the jurisdiction. It's a 5-year card, but it still has a few years to expiry.
So there's some advantages to that person in that scenario continuing to be able to do business in the Cayman Islands. I'll give you a prime example. Selling a vehicle. Currently, when they go to transfer that vehicle, there's many situations where the current owner has gone before a staff member in DVDL, signed their section of it, and then left the piece of physical paper with a friend, and we've had horror stories of when that vehicle has been transferred into the wrong name,
or even use the owner is still the owner.
Correct, or just not transferred at all, and it's been sold, and nobody the paperwork has not been filed. So this could be the paradigm shift that would allow that person, wherever they are in the world, to sell that vehicle. And if there was an online service that allowed a transfer of a vehicle, now you know securely that I am who I am.
I am me, yeah.
Hashtag I am me.
That's right.
That I could sign in, I could register my transfer, and I could participate with the new owner to and then we could finalize that transfer. But yes, there is the provision in the bill for the cabinet to make regulations that talks about how long after somebody leaves that they cease to participate in the program, or that they cease to have to update the register of where they're living, and etc.
In the regulations, okay. Because I mean, that is the flip side. We see the convenience, but then that person, for whatever reason, is no longer here.
Correct.
Has this card. It's a national ID issued by a government. It can still be, to the unsuspecting eye, valid.
Well, and that's so. There's 2 points that I want to touch on. One is around the things like immigration status on the card, because that will have changed, right?
Right.
But also, I think there's a need to think about like the case of pensions and so forth, and having things apart from those kinds of. So, in the case of immigration status on the card, for persons whose immigration status like that are quite likely to change, it would likely say see QR code, and if you scan the QR code, it would share the current immigration status, which in their case, so they would have a card, but their immigration status is there's no right to reside.
Right. So let me just, and I do appreciate a few extra minutes. The card is physical possession. The person, immigration status will say, work permit holder, however it's designed. The person is no longer here, but the card has X years to expire. It won't say CQR code then, right?
So for a person on a work permit, it would most likely say CQR code printed on the card.
Perfect.
So when because we know that there may be there's a few ways to do it. CQR code is most likely the more likely one. We also have the capability to issue cards that are in line with the work permit itself, so that if there's a shorter period, it could both expire at the same time. But if there was situations where the person was no longer had a right to reside, and they had a physical card, CQR code allows the accurate immigration status for that person to be displayed, which would say no work permit.
Which is akin to something that we were taught way back when in terms of security training and like your credit card. Before they had the chips, before they had photos on them. In this section, we would sign a signature, right? And we were told, hey, see photo ID, right? And I've done that to go to some stores in the big industrialized nations, and the person like, well, wait a minute, what's wrong here? I say, well, there's a credit card, but you want to know the signature to verify, not on the back of the card. A layer of security. Again, now that's probably, So we come back probably tomorrow again to continue discussion for part 2. Susan's going to bring cassava cake. I mean, it's a Wednesday.
I'll be back.
You'll be, see? Any requests?
At least with the cake.
No, thank you all very much. And I'm grateful to the listeners. Were attentive. Trust that they benefited as much as I did. There are a lot of questions that you've certainly answered. Hopefully they've provoked us to at least go look at the legislation. Is the regulation? Are there accompanying regulations already there accompanying the proposed bill?
Just the bills. That would be the first layer to get passed in the House, and regulations would be soon to come after that.
And is it, Madam Speaker? Can we have undertaken from the honourable member that the regulations will be put up for public consultation prior to adoption by Cabinet? All in favour? I agree. No, I want to do that because of my absolute deference to Mr. Billy Adam, who always thought regulations should be as much a part of the consultation process before implementation.
We have flagged throughout the law all of the places where regulation specifically will explain a concept further. So it's quite clear in the bill where those particular situations are, those nuances are.
Okay. Well, I certainly thank you, and if it's okay, perhaps to you, Mr. Trevor, any sort of points you want to leave, anything you want to share with us in closing, and Mr. Tibbs and then Mr. Brown.
Just to reiterate once again, for those who may have joined us a little bit late, I didn't hear earlier on in the show, the overarching theme here is that term that we're going to definitely coin.
Yeah.
I am me, you are you. This program gone to great lengths to ensure that the government is not taking control of people's identity. It is the complete opposite. The government is giving people back control of their identity, of their ability to share, of their ability to avail of services. And we're very hopeful and encouraged that if legislation is passed, and once the register is stood up and people are applying for cards and getting cards, that will drive efficiency, that will drive innovation, not just to deliver services more efficiently, but innovation in the types of services that are provided. Because if a large group of the population is utilizing cards, then both the public sector and the private sector can understand that group and that the numbers that are there, and then push out services that we don't have yet that people would benefit from, or improve the delivery of the services that are already there.
Mm-hmm. I can see many benefits. Hopefully we'll do many fares as well. Mr. Tibbets?
Yeah, so I think the thing here is really the register is a register, but the card is really a choice, and I would really encourage persons to familiarize themselves with the legislation and give serious consideration as to whether or not they want the card or not. And I think they'll find that if they've done that, the answer, there'll only be one answer. It'll be yes,
right.
Because the card is really a tool for them, and it empowers them. And even if they choose not to use it day to day, having it when you need it will be a benefit to them. So I'd really say familiarize yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, and we have, I've had some interesting discussions with friends, around this, and I think the key thing is really the level of integrity and respect of persons' data and data minimization, and the principles that are enshrined in the Data Protection Act that we have put into this, I think is key.
And Mr. Brown, in closing, perhaps we could maybe ask one question. We talked about a 5-year sort of expiry, and a question that's occurred to us is passports can be 10 years, or if you're under a certain age, of 5 years, under 16. What's the consideration, if any, as to why 5 years and not maybe an adoption similar to the passport?
So there's a few considerations with that. Yes, there are actually options available out there that could go longer.
Mm-hmm.
But initially, it's supposed to be a document that's documenting change.
Mm-hmm.
If you also recall, we are now able to issue this to any person. So in particular, children.
Mm-hmm.
Children physically change quite fast, and there is the capability to not issue the digital features to, say, a child, so that you don't have a 2-year-old that's trying to sign electronic documents, for instance. But by all means, we want to empower them
Right.
to this life of independence and signing as early as the parent or themselves would want. So there is some leeway there, but it's a great start. It's a great position to start from, and as we mature, that might be an area that we could look at. This is really the first time, though, that we will be achieving some of the critical mass for digital services that, for instance, was flagged in the Auditor General's report. When we talk about e-services as a government, we needed legislation to allow interoperability. We needed the capability for this entity to rely on the register, for instance, on this minimal data set to prove that this is who I am, to satisfy that requirement. So here it is. Here's the potential encompassed in these bills to allow the game-changing new paradigm in digital services that we've all been asking for. We've heard it over and over how inefficient certain services are, and this is the capability then, either physically with a card or through interoperability generally, to get some of that game-changing capability.
I very much appreciate you taking this extended time. I say this with the greatest of pride, for those who don't understand the diligence, the dedication, the absolute dogged determination of a civil service, not just the competence, but the confidence we have in them. You guys, as Trevor shared, the bags on the eyes weren't because they were like me watching the eclipse last night. You guys were working. The presentation today, it just shows the commitment, and for that, I think we're raising the bar. I'm hoping that as a populace, we will be in, and voter in particular, but all who are legally resident, because this idea is available to all. There may be some things that we didn't ask, we didn't consider, we may not think was appropriate to ask now. Put that into the feedback and share it. So imagine.egov.ky. Come on, it's 4 of us, man. We can do a quartet. There's a song by that famous singer.
None of you want people to listen back again.
No, but this would be like driving content to our channel. Come on, Trevor, I can hear that baritone that you got there.
We'll just say imagine.egov.ky.
Listen, I tried, right? Gents, thank you very much for
Dwayne, we would like to just publicly thank you and your listeners for the opportunity to speak to you about these bills. That we do feel that it is a paradigm shift in the capability of government to operate in a new way, from both a financial sector point of view, or just an average person that wants to just enjoy the new way that government is allowed to operate. And so it's truly been a privilege for all of us to have been given an opportunity to work on these bills and interact with this project. And we just want to thank you and your listeners.
Well, we're very, very, very happy that you could come. We look forward to not just during the consultation process, whether it's the passage, amendment, implementation, continuing education. If we could facilitate, we're willing, so no questions asked.
Thank you.
All right, Wednesday tomorrow, Miss Susan. So on the menu is 2 conch, I think. Oh, sorry, I was reading from the front page. No, please join me Start in the morning for the record. Come back for Talk Today after the midday news. We're going to be talking and with great honor to Dr. Steve McFeel about the sort of immigration issues facing us as part of our discussion tomorrow. So join us, and until then, be blessed.
Talk Today is brought to you by Subway, open 24 hours in Countryside, Anderson Square in Georgetown, and Centennial Towers in West Bay. And by the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your sister islands. MedLab in Smith Road Plaza, your complete medical laboratory solution. Call 949-7331.
Talk Today is proudly brought to you by Pirates Fest 2022. Stay in the know. Get the full event lineup at piratesfestcayman.com.
And Savannah Pharmacy in Countryside Shopping Village. Convenient opening hours, including Sundays and holidays.
Is 6 years.
3 beloved isles. 1 beloved station, Radio Cayman.
The voice.
The heart.
The soul